in just over 2 years. Also, this is a first in-person meeting for two of our directors who joined the board in 2021. Directors Thomas Kim and Dr. Laverne Lewis, I'd like to extend a special welcome to you as we begin the TriMet Board of Directors meeting and briefing for April 27, 2022.
Thank you, President Sim.
They've been with us virtually. And whether we're in person or online, we always start with the public forum. And to remind those who are unfamiliar with our meetings, the public forum provides an opportunity for the community to share thoughts, concerns, and feedback about TriMet and our service. And for those who wish to provide a comment, you've been asked to sign in ahead of time. And I want to remind you that we will ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And let's begin. And I'm going to call two, we have 5 individuals. And so I'm going to call the first two, John Charles and Susan, is it Baldholm? Okay. It was your handwriting I couldn't read, yes. So we'll start with you, John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As long as I'm coming down today, I figured I'd get a twofer here. Again, John Charles, Cascade Policy Institute. My comment really follows up from the meeting I watched last week on the IBRP project, Interstate Bridge Replacement Project, sometimes known cynically as CRC 2.0. And because that was the big reveal about the transit project. And no surprise, it was light rail, because it's always light rail. And I'd like to encourage you, as a longtime follower of this and someone who used to commute back when all the way from Gresham to Portland when that was the only light rail line there was, I encourage you to euthanize any more light rail expansion. Just stop. It's not working. The Southwest Corridor project, the IBRP project, you should just put a big no on that. Okay, all the forecasts, someone mentioned in the previous meeting, what happens when the forecasts don't match reality on the before and after reports. Nothing happens. FTA doesn't care. They give money away. That's their job. Once the money's away, they don't really care. Okay, but all the forecasts have been wrong. They've always been wrong on the high side, and the total ridership, even before the pandemic, was about 50% of forecast. Okay, anything on the IBRP is going to be just swag. It's a joke. If you have congestion price, if you have I-5, a new I-5 bridge with congestion pricing to maintain free flow conditions, which is more or less the plan, then buses are the big beneficiary. You don't need 40 feet of right-of-way on a super expensive bridge for slow trains going to nowhere. So I just think you're all appointed by the governor, and part of the problem of being a governor or mayor is people constantly tell you things you want to hear. Well, you're not hearing this for the money or the glamour. You're volunteers. I think what you owe the governor is the truth. And I think, this is not a good idea. More light rail, it's done. And I think you should have a really serious conversation over the next year about this topic of capital expansion. Expensive capital expansion at a time your ridership is plummeting, and it peaked in 2012. It's been going on for a long time. Your whole business model, in my view, is obsolete. And where you can start is with the bleeding, and that's the big transit projects you haven't done yet. You haven't condemned anyone's home yet. You haven't done purchasing yet. That's the time to stop there and work your way backwards. And I say this as a transit advocate, as a longtime transit rider. The model needs to be tweaked, and some people might not like it. And I think of the Twitter issue this week where Elon Musk buys, and a whole bunch of people at Twitter who work there don't like that, but the Twitter board has a fiduciary responsibility, and they said, you know what, we're taking the offer. I think you need to have that attitude, that you are the fiduciaries, and maybe some people might not like changing the business model, but that's what boards do. They make hard decisions. So I really encourage you to use this year to reset your vision. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Susan?
Hello, TriMet board leaders. My name is Susan Bladholm, and I am the founder of Frog Ferry. This year marks 35 years that I've been in transportation infrastructure and economic development in our region. As you're likely aware, we have had an ongoing struggle in providing the required documentation the TriMet finance team has required of us for an ODOT STIF, Statewide Transit Improvement Fund grant. We entered into a contract with TriMet last fall and did not anticipate having challenges in providing documentation since we had successfully engaged with TriMet in 2020 for an ODOT STIF grant as well. To Ms. Berkshire's memo outlining key issues, we acknowledge that we have not been in compliance with the grant requirements regarding maintaining a match. However, we have been operating in good faith throughout the duration of the past 7 months, and we have provided robust documentation, over 130 documents at the request of TriMet. We have not knowingly done anything wrong, and as a small nonprofit of 2 consultants, it's obvious that we have not been prepared to respond to TriMet's arduous requirements. Please help us find a path forward to reconciliation. We emailed all of you on March 7th requesting mediation, as is called out in the contract, and we have not received a response. We honor the fact that the TriMet finance team, they're doing their job. However, we are in the midst of a communications breakdown. At a meeting with City Council leaders yesterday, they suggested that we appeal to you, the TriMet board. TriMet has had so many challenges serving our community, given all of the hardships of recent years, and our dispute must be extremely irritating to your team, as it is for us. Yes, this is an unprecedented time, but we all need to reimagine our future. How do we facilitate commerce of people and products here in our region? It's proven that ferries are a best practice, and they induce demand for the first and final mile, which means building TriMet's ridership. We are innovating, and there's no clear path forward to starting a passenger ferry service here in the region. But we're offering a public-private partnership here with our group of professionals that have provided well in excess of $8 million at no taxpayer expense. We believe we can come to a quick resolution if your leadership can bring us to the table. We're all here to contribute to a better Portland. Please help us work through to a quick reconciliation and resolution. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Susan. And it's typical that we don't respond to public testimony, but if you are still here during the general manager's report, we can ask him to comment.
Okay, thank you.
The next 2 individuals is Amy Snyder and James Paulson. Amy, you're first.
Good morning, President Simmons and directors. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you all today. My name is Amy Snyder, and I currently work with Friends of Frog Ferry as the VP of Marketing. I've had the good fortune to be a brand strategy leader for some household brands, including Dasani, Hasbro, and Nabisco. But few projects on which I've worked have held the same promise as Frog Ferry. It's the right idea at the right time, and it's the community that will reap the rewards. I'm here today to ask for this board's help in finding a path forward, Frog Ferry and TriMet together. As many of you are likely aware, we have a group of committed people working for Frog Ferry. We also have a passionate supporter base in Portland who can't wait to see a passenger ferry service, which will add to Portland's reputation for world-class public transportation with an eye towards environmental stewardship and enhancing the lives of underserved communities. I led Frog Ferry's marketing plan development last summer. This plan was just one of 5 that comprised the Ferry Pilot Project Plan that we delivered to ODOT and TriMet in September as part of the 2021 STIF grant. All of us at Frog Ferry believe that this second grant would operate similarly to the first one, where payment would be issued in full upon receipt of the deliverables. We soon learned that this would not be the case, and have worked in good faith to be responsive to the requests of the TriMet finance team, including gathering invoices and supporting documentation from various contractors. I added 130 documents in total to the TriMet portal and focused on organizing it in a way that was easy for the TriMet financing team to access and review. I know that when we first started this process, there was good intention on both sides to work together. I believe both sides still have good intentions. As the board, you can help bring these good intentions to life for this project. ODOT was pleased with our plan and has always been supportive of our work. As things stand now, we are not able to finish the operations plan, and the viability of our organization is at stake without the STIF funds ODOT has granted us. We have asked ODOT and TriMet leadership to help us come to the table for mediation, as it states in our contract, and we have not heard back in over 6 weeks. We are hoping you all can help us break through this standstill. We acknowledge that we could have done things differently, and there's always room for improvement in our processes and approach. We've always tried to do the right thing in the best interest for the city of Portland. We asked TriMet to be a partner with us and help us find ways to access the grant funds that ODOT has awarded within the confines of the contract. The opportunity exists for us both to bring inspiration and hope to our region by working on this important transit project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's James Paulson, and I am the board chair for Frog Ferry. So thank you for allowing us this time. A little bit about myself. I'm a Portland native, very proud of that. I'm also proud that I'm a product of Portland Public Schools, Portland State, and the University of Oregon, in which we sit right now. So I am very much invested in Portland. I am a Portlander, an Oregonian through and through, and I've grown up with TriMet. And one of the things that has always impressed me about TriMet is TriMet being a leader in innovation and moving things forward. We are faced, after hearing what you guys have been talking about before this, the challenges that you're faced with are the challenges of the community. How are we going to reinvigorate this community? How are we going to reinvigorate people to get back onto public transportation? That's what we're trying to do at Frog Ferry. And what we're doing is we're starting by targeting areas North Portland, up by the St. John's Cathedral Park area, which are very challenged around transportation, and trying to make a link with downtown where we're trying to revitalize. We know that the best jobs are downtown. We've partnered with businesses all up and down the water corridor from Vancouver all the way down to Oregon City that are saying they want to see transit on the water. We need your help to bring this to life. We need to bring innovative ideas, keep them alive, and moving them forward. You, board members of TriMet, have the ability to help us do that. And as you've heard, we have made mistakes. We want to correct those. We want to move forward. We need your help to do this with mediation. I want to be able to wake up and say, our city, again, is leading the nation in what we're doing on developing our transit system. If we don't get the support and help from you, that our efforts will not be able to move forward. This is a very important time, a key time for us to move this forward, and that's why we're coming here with you right now. And just as everyone has said, both Susan and Amy, we are at a point where it's no one's fault, but we need to work together so we can solve this, so we can keep moving this forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our last person who signed up today to provide public comment is Maria, and I'm having difficulty reading your writing. Is it Vicente Taylor? I can't understand you, but
My name is Maya Vasquez.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. As I said, I'm Maya Vasquez Taylor, the community organizer for Bus Riders Unite at Opal Environmental Justice Oregon. I also sit on TriMet's Transit Equity and Advisory Committee. So it's Earth Month, and I'd like to take this time today to talk about TriMet's Climate Action Plan. The only route described in your action plan was electrification, and that raised concern for me as the leader of a local transit riders union. I have seen TriMet's plan for electrification over the next couple decades, and it does go into great detail, breaking it down into next steps and funds allocated. What I want to know is why this same energy is not matched when it comes to increasing transit ridership, which is equally, if not more so, a climate solution. When the pandemic has affected rates so much, where are the detailed goals and plans for the next decade, or even just the next year? I understand that electrification goals were set because of the state's goals to decrease emissions. If help or incentive is needed, TriMet should put pressure on the state to prioritize and set those goals, to get people out of cars and onto buses, if that's the pressure that you need. The state should be offering you support, so ask for that support. Low ridership levels on public transit are an environmental concern and should be given the same attention as other strategies being used to mitigate emissions in our state. My hope is that TriMet will put real dedicated research, time, and advocacy into providing us with concrete direction to get ridership back to pre-pandemic levels and beyond. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, since that was our last speaker, I'm going to close the public forum and open the business meeting. And typically, we start with board reports. And the first board report I'd like to invite to give a board report is Director Edwards, and he will provide an update on the latest Committee on Accessible Transportation. Director Edwards?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did not attend the meeting last week, but the staff has provided a report, and thank you, Chris Hunter, for that report. I'll just read some of the highlights here. Sam DeSue and staff appeared before the board and discussed decisions of a federal judge regarding the TSA and the federal mask mandate, which has been lifted. They talked about improving safety and security on the transit system, as well as the steering committee met as well. Bonnie Todd, of course, is convening that committee, and they're working to address the safety and security system. There were upcoming events in the organization. I'll dispense with those, talking about some of the monies for the budget that we just approved, and climate action plan as well. Skidmore Fountain area, it's been cleaned up and the tents have been removed. They've had added new cameras there as well, and along with some lighting. The Saturday market has resumed in this area, which is very important for commerce, and bringing some kind of normalcy to the area as well. The approval of the agenda, I'll pass on that. And the announcement from the chair, Jan Campbell, we talked about the paratransit, and are we still doing mass there? And we followed up with some conversations about the lift as well. That's pretty much it. I'll pass on the rest of the report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Edwards. Does anyone have any questions? Seeing none, I'm going to then go on next this morning with an update from Director Kim on the Metro Policy Advisory Committee.
President Simmons, if I may, my board report hasn't been finalized yet from the AMPAC.
Okay.
May I submit it to you and the rest of the board later today?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Now then, we're going to have an update from Director Lewis on the Reimagine Public Safety Committee. Director Lewis?
Thank you, Director Simmons. Our last Reimagine Public Safety Advisory Committee was on April 19th via Zoom. Very active, busy meeting. That particular meeting, we actually had a presentation on our security that carries arms from the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. But we started our meeting with safety and security updates that we receive each month, mainly of those issues or incidences that appear in the local media or on the news channels. That way, the members of the committee and council can ask further questions. After that, we had the public affairs team. They shared an update on the community-based mini grants, and I would like to thank Adam, Manish, and Anna Diana and Celeste. They're members of our community that actually stepped up to be part of the evaluation group for those RFPs. In about 2 weeks from now, we will be finishing up And I think the first week of May, we will be making the final decision and awarding those contracts. Our presentation from Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, well, I'll just want to add, the last couple of months, we have brought forth each of like the safety response team, and last month we actually had Multnomah County Sheriff's Office team present who they are, their training, who they collaborate with, and we've had a few personal presentations from members of those teams. And so it was really, really well accepted in the committee of a chance to ask questions directly. The presentation was by Sergeant Aaron Shanotsky from the Sheriff's Office, and we do invite members here and our board for ride-alongs. If you wish to ride along with our safety response teams, please do so, and you can contact VP Andrew. Thank you. I want to highlight, we did highlight the training. We talked about the demographics, and I think that was an earlier question of who the safety teams represent, and they do represent the communities, they represent the organizations of where they come from. We also, during our public safety advisory meeting, have an open forum. At this particular meeting, there was no one bringing forward a comment from the community, but we do allow thoughts and ideas and questions. Our next meeting is May 17th, and that concludes our report.
Thank you, Director Lewis. Are there any comments or questions? I'm just so happy to hear all of the work that's moving forward. This is a priority of not only mine, but the full board and the agency as well. So thank you so much. For our final report this morning, John Gardner, Director of Transit, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Affairs, will provide an update from the Transit Equity Advisory Committee in place of Director Way, who's home recovering from COVID. So John, welcome.
Thank you, and good morning, President Simmons, members of the board. I'll be brief, but I'm available for any questions you might have. So we've had amazing participation over the last 2 years of COVID with, volunteer community-based organizations between 14 and 17 every month coming to inform TriMet about what's going on in their communities, but also hear what we're trying to do and inform that process. So this month's meeting was a continuation of that effort. We first focused on giving folks an update on the Better Ed project, as you heard a little bit about this morning. We recently had a service disruption and there are 4 planned as we sort of construct that project, where we were able to have 100 TriMet volunteers work and provide ride guide services and get people to and fro different bus shuttles to make sure they can continue on their day, and there'll be 3 more planned events, but it went very well. We're in the process of doing our FX bus operator training, so many of our TIAC members are seeing those big green buses out in the community as folks get prepared for the September 18th launch that Executive Director Netta mentioned earlier this morning. We also reminded TIAC that our Access Transit grant period is open now. Last year we awarded $1.8 million in free fare grants to about 115 nonprofits across the 3 counties, and we're in that process and doing it again, and many of our TIAC member organizations participate in that program, so we're asking them to help get the word out. We also shared updates around the federal mask mandate and the subsequent changes that have happened over the last few weeks, because these organizations are great stewards of helping us get that information out to the public. As Maya said, and I want to thank her for coming this morning, we also talked about TriMet's climate action plan. And just sort of circling back to what she was saying, a lot of members asked questions about our transit-oriented goals for addressing higher density near transit, and housing and legislative priorities. Members also noted that they really want to see TriMet, as Maya said, place greater emphasis on reducing miles traveled, and increasing ridership and focusing on reducing single vehicle usage, even if it means using diesel buses in order to keep a reliable and substantial service in place. So I just wanted to recognize that it was a robust conversation. Now, the bulk of the TIAC meeting really centered around our STIF pilots that we're still sort of working to formalize. And just at the high level, because we're in conversations with ODOT, the high level is to sort of repurpose low-income fare resources that we did not spend during the previous year and a half and send those back out to low-income communities, including low-income high school students through a summer pass program, vulnerable low-income seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities through increased grant programs, and investing in our low-income participants with initial month of ridership when they renew or when they begin the program. And so I think probably in the months to come, we'll do more of a robust presentation on where that project's out. But right now, we're just working with ODOT to sort of finalize the project, and then we're going to build it out with TriMet staff to make sure we can launch on time. So in general, it was a great conversation, again, great participation, and looking forward to the next meeting. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions?
When is the next meeting?
The next meeting is the second Tuesday of May at this point. And I don't remember that date offhand. But everybody is welcome. Or I should say all are welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thomas?
Yes, thank you, President Simmons. I am prepared to present my impact meeting.
Very good.
report now.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. At the March meeting, which was last month, immediately following our board meeting, MPAC discussed the proposed RTP and the MTIP amendments on the I-205 tolling project, and discussion took the entirety of the meeting. And according to certain staff members from the city of Hillsborough, actually, who was attended for years, it was the most lively MPAC conversation and discussion we've had in years. And many MPAC members had questions, and they were focused on if the tolling on I-205 could sunset if the separate regional mobility pricing program does not move forward. And there was lots of discussion about that, and many lively discussions on that. And in light of this concern from some members, MPAC members passed a motion that Metro consider additional language to sunset of tolling on 205. Yesterday, well, actually 2 days ago, Metro Council did vote in support of the RTP and NTIP amendments for I-205 tolling with a letter of agreement in place between Metro and ODOT, securing additional commitments on issues that had been voiced at JPEC as well as MPAC. And to be sure, our TriMet members, staff members, not board members, participated on committees on transit mitigations for the I-205 tolling and regional mobility pricing project, as well as serving on the Equitable Mobility Advisory Committee to discuss how future tolling could be modeled for using off of our low-income fare program, and also integrate our HOP pass as well. Thank you, President Simmons.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board? Okay, hearing none, we will now turn to the general manager for his monthly report. General Manager DeSue.
Thanks, President Simmons. Good morning, board members, staff, and the public. Morning, and thank you for being here with us today. This morning, we're going to share timely information with you regarding our COVID-19. We'll give you a brief update on the March ridership report, and we'll give you the latest on our operator shortage and hiring efforts. We will acknowledge not one but two well-deserved retirements on our executive leadership team, and then we're going to provide a brief progress report on a Better Ed project here. We'll tell you a little bit about our climate action plan, which was just submitted to the FTA. And then we're going to celebrate one of our most decorated MICE operators whose commitment to safety has been honored yet again. So let me just start here. We got a lot to get started with. And of course, with COVID-19, it was another event-filled week last week with the developments on the national level, which affected all of us at home here. Bottom line, masks are no longer required on transit buses or trains. When the federal mandate was lifted, we immediately heard reactions from both sides. I received a call from the union immediately, are you going to take masks down? Then I heard a call from our employees, are you going to keep masks in place? So we recognize that there were strong feelings from both sides on the issue. And we welcome anyone who wants to continue masking for their safety and safety of others to do so. And we will also be continuing with mask on board our vehicles for anyone that might want a mask while riding. We've asked our employees, we've asked our riders to treat everyone with respect, regardless of their decision. And we have a lot of folks here in our meeting that are wearing masks as well. So within 24 hours of that federal ruling, Multnomah County's top health official came out urging the continued mask use while riding public transit, especially during the long trips. They said that masks would help protect our most vulnerable neighbors that use our service. And this plea was made both by TriMet and also by the regional health officers as we started to see this slight uptick in cases of the virus. So please, everyone, do what you feel is best to protect your health and those that you care about. Kind of moving on and turning to the March ridership, TriMet provided 4.4 million rides this past March. Our system ridership was up 27% over the same time last year. However, we are still down more than 46% overall from ridership levels before the pandemic. Our frequent service bus lines and weekend service on both bus and MAX continue to perform better, with ridership having recovered to about 65% of our pre-pandemic levels. Now I turn to a transition on updating our hiring process and our efforts that are going on with recruitment. As you know, on Friday, TriMet announced our most aggressive hiring pitch of new bus operators, an improved starting pay of $25.24 per hour, and a $7,500 hiring bonus over 3 years. This announcement just came just after 3 weeks after our last hiring bonus increase. But to be direct, it could not have come sooner. Our hiring incentives are bringing in more applicants, but just not enough. So we must hire, and I want to repeat this, we must hire to return service back to pre-pandemic levels, 327 operators to get back to that level there. So we want to bring service back, and it's a top priority here as we move forward to increase ridership on our vehicles. But with the current service levels, we're being met right now with our current staffing levels, but we're challenged to bring on many more operators if we are to fully restore service. And most certainly to expand service in the future as we are looking at our comprehensive service analysis right now. TriMet's bus operators are excellent stewards of customer service. And foremost, there's no experience necessary, and we'll teach people how to drive and how to do it the TriMet way. So if you know anyone who's looking for a job to be an excellent bus rider, please invite them to visit TriMet.org careers to learn all about the opportunities that are available here at TriMet. We're also hiring mechanics and for many other positions at TriMet. Next this morning, we'll soon be saying happy retirement to 2 members of our executive leadership team, and I hope that they're both in the audience. By now you heard that Executive Director of Engineering and Construction, Steve Witter, he announced his retirement. And if not, while you're taking that in, I will also let you know that Dee Brookshire, our Executive Director of Finance and Administrative Services, has also announced plans to retire as well. Both Dee and Steve, thank you. Just want to take a moment to both of you to let you know, thank you for your service and your commitment to TriMet and for helping to make it and our regional transit system better today. And because of both of your contributions, we want to say thank you to both of you. And of course, we will say our proper goodbyes and best wishes in the weeks ahead to both of you. So, and look forward to inviting the board to be there with the farewells and the best wishes there. Next, a quick update on our Better Ed project. The first disruption required for the MAX line extension and reliability improvements project went very well. We wrapped up as scheduled, and we resumed regular service on Sunday, April 9th. And I just want to stop and pause and thank all of our employees who stepped up and helped with this project to really help our riders navigate through the disruption that was taking place. For projects like this, we invite every one of our employees across the agency to serve as ride guides, so that we had hundreds of employees who volunteered to go out and assist our riders making connections on buses and MAX trains as people traveled around the disruption. We had a fantastic participation, and that pays off for spades for everyone working together to make this project a success. Work continues, though, on the Better Red project, and our estimated completion, is the fall of 2024. Our next required shutdown for the project is scheduled for late July. Fittingly, during the Earth Month, TriMet submitted our climate action plan to the Federal Transit Administration, and it's part of the FTA's Sustainable Transit for a Healthy Planet Challenge. The plan charts out TriMet's course in climate leadership, and it lays out a path forward on our march toward zero emissions bus fleet. It's available for everyone on the FTA website, along with our climate action plan of peer transit agencies across the country. Among the highlights are 70% reduction in carbon emission just in the last year, and we will talk more about that contribution to that impressive figure when the board considers the resolution a little bit later. In the meantime, the plan is also available at trimet.org/climateplan for anyone who would like to take a look at it. Finally, I'd like to recognize another of our amazing employees. To say Kim Looper is a man of few words would be putting it mildly, but he's a light rail operator whose body of work speaks for itself. Kim is the most highly decorated operator at TriMet, and the reason why comes down to one word, and that word is safety. I'm going to have our Chief Operating Officer, Bonnie Todd. She's here to tell us all about the latest award that Kim is receiving, his 40th Superior Performance Award. 40th. Bonnie?
Yeah, thank you, General Manager. So Kim, I just met you. This is your 40th time receiving the Superior Performance Award. You encompass TriMet's core value of safety. I want to thank you for embodying that value day in and day out to provide the very best and safest service for our riders. Receipt of this award is an extraordinary achievement requiring that an operator complete 1,960 hours on the road with no preventable accidents, no more than 16 hours of lost time, no unexcused absences, and no warnings, reprimands, or suspensions. And that's not all. Additionally, the operator must adhere to standard operating procedures while providing considerate and considerable customer service with no more than 7 customer complaints. Operator Looper, you have achieved this 40 times, with 39 of those years being consecutive. Kim has already achieved the Gold Grandmaster Operator status by achieving his 30th Superior Performance Award 10 times ago, which put him in the elite category of fewer than a dozen TriMet operators. Kim also has an astounding record of 30 years of perfect attendance and is a member of the National Safety Council Million Mile Club with 35 years of Safe Driver Awards from them. I'd like to have General Manager Dessou join us now for a special presentation.
Kim, on behalf of TriMet, we want to just say thank you for 40 years of superior performance for us. Always tell people that the lifeblood of our organization are you, that's out in the front line, really taking care of our passengers and operating safely. So thank you very much for your service, sir, to our organization and to the region. You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
I don't know if you want to address the board or any words that you want to say as How did you do it for 40 years?
Just showed up for work every day.
Yeah. Okay, all right, hold on. I want the board to have an opportunity to say.
Director Lewis? She jumped over the.
It's an honor to
Oh.
shake your hand. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I want to thank you for your commitment and your dedication. It's exemplary. I don't know how you do it.
I don't know either. I just did it.
Well, you're a model for a number of people within the agency, and just want to tell you how much we appreciate your dedication and your service. You know, the public benefits from it.
Thank you.
And I'll simply add, on top of the safety record, I know how much of an impact you have on people's daily lives. There's kids and adults out there that you get to see every day. You get to watch them grow up. We get stories from people that tell us about how a bus driver asked a question one day and it changed their life. So I really am grateful for you representing us safely and showing up every day. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So, President Simmons, I have just a point or two I want to make. First, I want to thank Susan, James, and Amy from Frog Ferries. I want to thank you for being here today and your comments. Want to let you know that I'm going to go back and sit down with staff, and we'll sit down and we'll get together with you very soon. So you can expect something coming from me to have a meeting with you so that we could start some mediation conversation with you on that. Mia from Bus Riders Unite, increase in ridership is our priority. It's a pillar for us. So we would love to work with you if you have any strategies that you would like to work with and provide to us as we continue to look at creating strategies for ridership. And then John Charles from the Cascade Institute, I went back and talked to him on the break just to let you know, board. I look forward to really sitting down myself with him and having a conversation along with staff. So we'll report back to you on that as well. President Simmons, that concludes my report this morning.
Thank you, General Manager Dessou. Let's turn now to the consent agenda, and items appearing on the consent agenda are considered routine and may be approved by the board in one blanket motion. This morning's consent agenda includes a lot more number of items than typically. It's approving the minutes of our last meeting of March 23rd, 2022, a resolution directing the reading of all ordinances by title only. There's Resolution 22-04-18 authorizing the modification of an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Portland for design and construction management services for the Division Transit Project. There's Resolution 22-04-19 authorizing a contract modification with, is it Rittmeyer? Is that how you pronounce it? Rittmeyer for ordinary repair or maintenance and or minor alterations for HVAC services. Resolution 22-04-20 authorizing a contract modifications with CBM LLC, Columbia Pressure Washing LLC, and Relay Resources Enterprises for custodial goods and services for TriMet facilities and transit centers. And finally, Resolution 22-04-21 authorizing contracts with Columbia Pressure Washington LLC, and Damac and Associates Clean LLC, and GNL Janitorial LLC for bus shelter cleaning services. So before I ask for a motion, does any board member want to move any of the items from the consent agenda to be considered under resolutions? Director Edwards.
Madam Chairman, I apologize. I'd like to go back and ask a question of the General Manager under his report.
Oh, could we do that after we resolve the consent agenda? Okay. So I don't hear where any board member wants to remove one of those resolutions from the consent agenda. So is there a motion to approve the items contained in the consent agenda?
I move to approve the entire consent agenda. Thomas Kim.
Thank you, Director Kim. And Director Edwards, did you second?
Yes.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Does anyone want to make any further comment? So I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Sustained? So motion carries. So Director Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question on your operator and ridership issue. How do you juggle making sure that you don't have too many operators, and even though I know there's a shortage now, but make sure that that works with the ridership so that there's some kind of equilibrium there?
We have a great question, Director Edwards. We have a team in our transportation department, just as well as our planning department, that's working together. They look at the service hours, and then they actually put the need of how many operators that we need to address those service hours. Currently now, with the vacancy rate that's taking place right now, we have lowered or reduced our ridership by the 10% that I'll be talking with you today about. And we're trying to go and recruit and retain those operators in order to build back that 10% that we removed back in January. So we have a group that is personally responsible for the manpower, and every day they're reviewing all of the data and all of the statistics to ensure that we have adequate personnel to provide the service.
Thank you.
So now we're going to move on to resolutions. And let me see where I am. Okay. The first resolution to come before the board this morning is Resolution 22-04-22, authorizing a contract with Siemens Mobility, Inc. for the West Side Blue Line LRV substation feeder breaker retrofit project. Mr. General Manager, your comments.
Thanks, President Simmons. Members of the board, we request authorization for a contract to upgrade and modernize the feeder breakers that support our West Side Max Blue Line light rail system. These breakers are part of the LRV substations, which are the main source of propulsion for the trains. The feeder breakers on the West Side Max have been in use since the line began service and need to be retrofitted to maintain and ensure standards for state of good repair. This is a sole source contract. Siemens was the original manufacturer and remains the only firm that can provide the necessary upgrades in a cost-efficient manner. The proposal contract will retrofit 50 substation breakers over about 3 years. The total contract amount request is for $1.68 million. It is included in our Maintenance of Way Department annual operating budget. For diversity, we looked at Siemens Tualatin facility, which will be doing the work. The total employee count is 50, with 22% identifying with a minority group and 16% as female. I recommend the board's approval.
Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Director
Second.
Gonzalez. Thank you, Director Bauman. It's been moved and seconded. Any comments on the board? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Moving on, we really like the next one, not that we don't like all of the resolutions, but Resolution 22-04-23 is authorizing a contract with Gillard LLC for the purchase of 24 40-foot zero-emission battery electric buses for fixed route service. General Manager, your comment.
President Simmons, members of the board, this resolution here is obviously an exciting one for all of us here, as it requests authorization for TriMet's first bulk purchase of zero-emissions battery electric buses. So just want to tell staff out here, congratulations. I know Young is in the audience here. This will provide triple the size of our current electric bus fleet and build on our experience with Gillig long-range battery electric bus. We currently have 5 of the buses currently running in service right now. You may have seen them recently serving our riders on line 6 and also line 20. TriMet selected Gillick for the contract after testing a number of zero-emission bus platforms. We have 5 short-range battery electric buses from New Flyer, 5 Gillicks, a long-range New Flyer bus which is under lease, and 4 diesel to battery electric bus conversions. With TriMet already making the commitment to transition to all zero-emission buses by 2040, this contract will grant the authority for us to begin building out our fleet. The Gillick contract is a state cooperative purchasing contract, and as a member of the cooperative, TriMet is able to take advantage of pricing results from the Washington State RFP for zero emissions buses, which was also awarded to Gillick. Zero emissions battery electric buses currently cost about $1 million each, roughly doubling what we would pay for a new diesel bus. Therefore, the proposed contract amount for the 24 buses, extended battery warranties, and training is $26.67 million. Funding is available in TriMet's FY 2023 budgets and includes a combination of federal and state grants, operating resources, and possible bond procedures. Gillick manufactures all of its zero-emission buses at its facility in Livermore, California, and I've had the opportunity to go there at the manufacturer itself, where the workforce there is 67.5% minority and 9.4% female. Your approval of the recommendation of the resolution is recommended.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director Lewis. It's been moved and seconded. Anyone want to make a comment?
I'd like to, President Simmons, if that's all right. Thank you for all the work leading up to this moment. This is a huge purchase, and I know that there's a lot of research that goes into making this decision. General Manager Dessou, you mentioned that there was a lot of platforms that were reviewed. I noticed this is only showing one bidder for this. Could you please elaborate on how you evaluated your options, how you decided on this vendor? What were the factors that inevitably led you in this direction?
So I appreciate that, Director Gonzalez. I'm excited to answer that, but I want the people that was front and center of this. So I'm going to call up Executive Director of Maintenance Operations, Roland Hoskins, and also Young Park, our manager of zero emission buses, to answer that question.
Yeah, so just to repeat the question, I think what I heard is how did we make the decision and what data or other elements did we use to make this, or criteria that we used to get to where we got to. So in our plan and others, we wanted to test several different platforms that we could. We didn't just rely on the vendor's information. We got separate software that we can look at the performance of the vehicles on our own, so that we're not relying on their basically their own technology and proprietary information. So, and then as I mentioned earlier in the committee, I asked Young to literally go out and test these buses to their brink because we need reliable vehicles to deliver service. And so with that, I'm going to give it to Young and let him tell a little bit about the journey.
It's definitely been a journey of learning experience here for us, going through each bus, through putting them through their paces. Foremost, we're able to have the resources of a test operator here, and that lady has been very helpful in providing a platform. A full-time operator who was actually on a bit of a maternity leave, assigned to us to get each bus through their paces. One, not a maintenance or another person, but actually a true operator to get these buses on what we call our test route, which is line number 20. It's a route that's about 18 miles long from Gresham to Beaverton. It also goes up the Burnside Hills, about an 8% grade for about 1.5 miles. That provided a good baseline here for us to put each bus through their paces, look at their range, look at their consumption rates, assure that what if is braking, what are the common symptoms that these buses are if braking, what are they and why are they braking? What is the drivability? How does it, foremost, are these buses safe? We looked at a number of different platforms. We're also able to have on retainer here for us 2 buses from New Flyer, another major bus vendor. Putting those buses on a head-to-head with our Gilligs, putting all those through their paces. The 5 Gillig buses that the general manager alluded to that are currently on the line 6 and the 20 was also a good baseline here for us. These are frequent bus lines that are working through their paces. Line 20 is that route, the test route. The number 6 is our urban route, which caters to down MLK, a lot of stops and goes, lots of doors opening, lots of doors closing. In the days of COVID with HVAC systems running, the elements of our passenger comfort, our drivability, all those were different factors that we looked at in putting each bus through their paces. And it was determined that Gillig is a bus route and a manufacturer that provides the platform for us with the lessons learned on the 5 buses going forward, ability for us to have a seamless transfer and a connectivity. It's not just the buses, but you also have to have the charging technology that goes with it. So those were all the efforts that were taken with our recommendation to go with our purchase of 24 buses for Gillig.
Another factor on the practical side is also we have a large number of Gillig buses in our fleet, and a lot of the same windows, the same parts, and a lot of those other factors. So it can help us reduce our inventories and other factors as well, or things that we need to run a fleet. So that also contributed to the decision. I must say, though, the New Flyers performed quite well too. So the second generation that we had, they performed pretty well.
So Director Gonzalez, I just want to chime in. I think another big factor, and they'll probably tell you here, we talked about it earlier, is the time it takes from go to receiving a bus. And we're talking 24, possibly months, even longer. We got an opportunity here to piggyback off of the state of Washington's contract right now so that we could move forward. So that was a critical opportunity for us to actually take advantage of as well, along with knowing the performance, because we've already tested the long-range buses.
So they show up in 24 months?
We anticipate they'll begin to start arriving about 18 months from now, with the last bus due to arrive in about 24 months.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. So I know it was moved, and I don't recall, was there a second?
Yes.
Yes, Director Lewis. Yes, thank you. So it's been moved and seconded, and I'm going to call for the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And I don't hear any opposition, no. And so motion carries. So now we're going to go on to our next resolution, which is 22-04-24, authorizing a contract with Bretnauer Oil Company for mobile R99 renewable hydrocarbon diesel fuel for TriMet's lift and west vehicles.
All right.
General Manager, your comments, please.
Thank you, President Simmons. Members of the board, this resolution is also another exciting one for TriMet, for the region, for climate here. It seeks authorization for a contract that will allow TriMet to fuel our lift paratransit vehicles, our WES vehicles with the R99 renewable diesel. We've transitioned all 700 of our buses in our fixed route fleet to renewable diesel in December of last year, making this change at a relative small cost, lowering the greenhouse gases emissions with our fixed route bus by 61% compared to the biodiesel blend that we will be using in our buses, starting with Lyft for the next 15 years. In addition, R99 offers reductions in long-term maintenance costs. Our Lyft buses and our commuter rail vehicles for WES require wet fueling, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Unlike our fixed route bus fleet, which uses on-site fueling tanks at all 3 garages, Lyft and WES rely on a mobile fueling truck that report to their facility to fill up each one of the vehicles. We have issued a request for proposal for mobile R99 fueling, and Brett Hauer emerged as the highest ranked proposal. The proposed contract is for $15.1 million over a period of 5 years. The amount is included in the transportation operations budget for fiscal years 22 through 27. Brett Hauer has 47 employees. 25% of those employees are female, and about 15% are minority. And your approval to the resolution is recommended.
Mr. General Manager, some of the board are bringing to my attention that they don't think this resolution was in their packet. So we just want to take a minute and double check.
Okay, thank you.
No, it's not in the packet, they're telling me.
So,
You know, how do we wish to proceed?
let me look to staff. Can we pull this immediately and bring it to next month's meeting? Roland, are you in the audience? You and the Chief Operating Officer, Bonnie.
We could also take a break, and it could be sent to us. Kimberly could send it to us, and we could, take 5 minutes to read it.
Can we do that if possible? No.
If it's not a problem, I'd rather postpone it till next month, because I'd rather have a moment to look at it.
Okay. Okay.
Could both of you come up and,
Okay.
will it be a problem if we pull it?
It's not like buses.
Mm-hmm.
What do you,
Good morning. I don't believe that it will, but what I'd like to ask is just a moment to contact Rochelle Glazier. She's our Executive Director of Transportation, and she's out sick today. But if I could just check with her to be 100% sure, but I do not believe it's an issue.
Thanks. Sound like Eileen wants to give you a comment also behind you.
Okay.
Good morning, Board. I'm Eileen Collins, the manager of the LIFT program. We had a prior contractor in place to wet hose fuel our fleet that failed on their obligations, and so our contractor has been assuming the role of fueling the fleet themselves, our transportation provider, and they don't have staffing to continue that level of operation. So we were really hoping that a decision could be made today. If it can't, we understand the process and we can work to rally resources, but we're using operators to do that fueling. When we use the operators, we can't make pullout. So it's a challenge for us currently.
Madam Chair, if you want to recess for 5 minutes, I'm good.
Director Lewis, are you good if we recess for 5 minutes? Okay. Let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll resume at 5 after 11. Yeah. Yeah.
That's very understandable.
First of all,
We're gonna discuss this one.
okay. We just need to wait for the general manager to return. We should all clap.
Stop it. I have an idea, everybody. No, no.
Don't do it.
Let's just all leave. Before Maggie sees no one. No, I'm kidding.
We could all leave and have the room empty.
That would be
Well,
April Fool's.
yeah. Thomas just left too.
Let's switch rooms.
Here comes Thomas. We were going to practice an April Fool's joke and all leave. All right, let's reconvene. And so first I want to give a moment to the board secretary to make a comment about the hiccup.
Yeah, so board members, I just want to sincerely apologize for the oversight. Looking in the portal, I can see how that document was missed, and I apologize. I sincerely don't want to cause you any delay or frustration or delay in the decisions of the board. So I will make sure that in the future that I definitely double and triple check those for you, and I sincerely apologize.
Thank you. Well, no, I normally catch things, and I didn't. And for me, it had to do with there were just so many resolutions, and so So anyway, do you want to make any more comments on this resolution, and then we'll see if there are any questions on the part of the board.
Thanks, President Simmons. So let me go back and start and kind of let the board know that this is really exciting to us as TriMet. And again, it seeks the authorization for a contract that would allow TriMet to fuel our Lyft paratransit vehicles and also our WES vehicles with the renewable diesel. We've moved all 700 vehicles in our fixed route fleet to renewable diesel in December. And then, making this change is a relatively small cost. It's going to lower the greenhouse gas emissions by 61% compared to the biodiesel blend that we've been using in our buses, and starting with Lyft for the last 15 years. So in addition to the R99, offers reduction in long-term maintenance costs as well. Our Lyft buses and commuter rail vehicles for WES requires wet fueling. And I think when I left off, I was going to talk a little bit about that. Unlike our fixed route fleet, which uses on-site fueling tanks at all 3 garages, Lyft and WES, they rely on a mobile fueling truck that pulls up to their facility and fuel up each vehicle individually. So that's where the wet fueling comes from. So we've issued this request for proposal for the mobile R99 fueling, and Breath Hour emerged as the highest ranked proposal. The proposed contract is for $15.1 million over a period of 5 years. The amount is included in the transportation operations budget for the fiscal years 2022 through 2027. Breath Hour has 47 employees, 25.5% female, and about 15% minority. And your approval of the resolution is recommended.
So let me see about board questions. And Director Edwards, you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I had several questions, and I've got a procedural question as well, I guess, under our procurement process. I guess, first of all, I'll talk about the evaluation criteria. The workforce diversity is at a level of 5%, and work plan and reliability assurance is 25%. And I guess I'd like to know why are they at those particular levels? And at the same time, how do you evaluate those different criteria?
Appreciate it, Director Edwards.
And my second part of that question is, when I look at the Source Evaluation Committee, I don't see anyone from CAT on that committee, and I would suggest that they be participant in that as well, given that they should be considered, especially when we're talking about workforce diversity.
Okay. Appreciate your question. So we have Wes. And Eileen, why don't you come up also kind of to talk about CAT's participation as well with this here. So we'll start with you, Les.
Thank you, General Manager Dessou. Good morning, Director Edwards, President Simmons, members of the board. My name is Les Spittler. I'm the Procurement and Supply Chain Management Department Director. Typically for a commodity-based contract like this, and for fuel specifically, we have always issued a low bid solicitation. However, this go around, we felt like there were certain factors due to the experience with our previous contractor that Eileen mentioned earlier that was having performance issues. They were not fueling the fleet every night, which was impacting Lyft's ability to pull out and meet the demands of the customers. So the work plan and reliability assurance criterion was specifically important because we wanted to see, number one, what they did to recruit and retain drivers, because drivers is a critical aspect of this service, being able to get to the yard and fuel all the vehicles. And then also, what sort of backup options they had, because relying on a driver pool is not always the most assuring. So that we wanted to see what sort of backup plan they had. So we made that 25% of the criteria, the overall criteria, because we felt like that was really important. I think we landed on the 5% for workforce diversity. We wanted to be able to evaluate that. As to why it was only 5%, I can't specifically say, but we felt like price was important and the work plan and reliability criteria.
So those are basically arbitrary numbers, so I guess I would presume that we might take a look at that and reevaluate the workforce diversity and maybe look at a higher level of importance. That would be good.
I've got some questions, President Simmons.
Okay. Director Gonzalez, you have some questions.
Thank you, President Simmons. Thanks for coming up and appreciate the ability to have this review. It provides an opportunity to actually look at how we go about making these decisions. So help me out here. This is a contract for fuel that we have only recently began purchasing. So are these all new vendors, or this is the first time we're entering into contracts with these vendors?
I believe, from my recollection, this is the first time we're doing business with Brett Hauer. However, they've been in business for, I think it's a 3-generation family company, so they've been doing this around the Portland area for a long time, but I believe this is the first time we're doing business with them. When we're going out for a solicitation like this, we do survey the market. We reach out to vendors in advance, make sure that we get competition, make sure that there's, that we can maximize participation from firms that, may be new and may not have the company experience, but certain individuals in their ownership may have that. So we made some accommodations in this solicitation to allow more firms to participate that wouldn't have otherwise been able to had we kept the experience requirements for the company itself.
And I commend the work of the staff to do that outreach. I see that there was dozens of companies that were reached out to, and I know it takes a lot of work to get 3 bids these days. Setting this precedent with new vendors, I think it's important for us and the public to be aware that, we get a chance to establish a new relationship. And it is our custom that, these new relationships become critical. It's what helps in the renewal process. We're not likely to go hopping around from vendor to vendor as we renew. So as we set these precedents, I think the outreach becomes important, as well as this early criteria. So now I have a question about the committee side. Again, commend you for bringing a committee in and having some community members in. With reliability being so important, did you vet evaluators, or did you explain to evaluators how reliability should be looked at? If they're not coming from transit or operational stuff, I didn't know how they were able to evaluate what was such an important piece of this contract.
We do have a source evaluation committee orientation meeting. It's more about how scores are independently given at first, so that you're not hearing the scores and feedback from other members, and then the group gets together and everybody sort of talks about their scores, gives the strengths and weaknesses that they found in the proposals. And then after that discussion is held, members have the ability to revise their scores. So if somebody raised a point that they didn't either pick out themselves or they didn't realize was so important, then they have the ability to revise their scores before we come to an overall consensus score, which is represented here in the resolution.
And I appreciate that. I know, having sat on selection committees, it's such a unique experience every time. I think we all kind of see this through a set of lenses, and as long as the same evaluator's looking at all of them, you kind of neutralize how their criteria is. I'm a hard grader, so I tend to score low across the board, but I'm doing it consistently. I have a question about the diversity section now, because it is something that's critical to how we invest in community, and it's also important. Did you factor in the workforce diversity criteria? Were you factoring the internal demographics as well as the business classification as if they're DBE certified, or was it all internal staff diversity?
Because this work does not lend itself to subcontracting, we focus those 5 points on the diversity of the workforce, the leadership of the firm, not so much on their whether they're certified or not. Are any of the proposals coming from certified firms? Fleet Fuels is a disadvantaged business enterprise as well as a minority business enterprise.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any additional questions?
I have more of just a quick foundational question. So a few months ago, the board approved a contract for renewable diesel, and how does this differ from that one?
Thank you very much for that question. We issued a solicitation last August for both bulk delivery for a fixed route fleet as well as mobile fueling for the lift fleet. We did not receive any bids at that time for the mobile fueling fleet for lift. So what we did after that solicitation, and that was the resolution that came to the board in November, I believe, that was for Carson Oil, that was for the bulk delivery for the fixed route. What we did after that solicitation concluded and we didn't receive any bids is we circled back with all the vendors who we thought would submit a bid for that, and we asked why. We gained some market intelligence, and then we worked with Eileen and Margot in Lyft and made some adjustments to the criteria, to the window of time when a service provider can fuel the fleet, in hopes of getting more competition. And so for this solicitation, we received 3 bidders, which 8 months ago we received 0. So we were pleased that we received some competition for this.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm ready to call the question. Is there a resolution to approve, a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, Thomas Kim.
Thank you, Director Bauman and Director Kim. So we've already had comments, so I'm going to go for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is anyone opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, so we have 2 opposed and the rest, and so the motion carries. Thank you. We're now going to move on to Resolution 22-04-25, and that is authorizing a contract with, I think is it Eddie or Ely Bailey? LLP for independent audit services. Mr. General Manager, your comments, please.
Thanks, President Simmons, members of the board. Annual audits by respected independent certified public accountants has long been part of TriMet's system of internal controls and financial reporting. The resolution before you requests authorization for a contract with Ely Bailey LLP to perform these services. Ely Bailey was selected through a competitive request for proposal. The $1.2 million contract covers a 5-year term. The services are included in the Finance and Administrative Services Division FY22 budget. For diversity, the firm's workforce is 53% women and 14% minority. TriMet has audit work that must begin next month to meet strict deadlines for stakeholders. I recommend your approval.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Director Lewis.
Second.
Thank you, Director Edwards. It's been moved and seconded. Does anyone wish to make any comments? Hearing none, I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next resolution is 22-04-26, authorizing submission of proposed redistricting map and public outreach report to the Oregon Secretary of State. Mr. General Manager, your comments, please.
Thanks, President Simmons, members of the board. The resolution before you would authorize TriMet to take all of the information and feedback that we've gathered on the board redistricting process and submit it along with the proposed redistricting map to the Oregon Secretary of State. We'd like to bring in J.C. Vanetta, our Executive Director of Public Affairs, who has a short presentation before the vote.
Yes, thank you, General Manager DeSue. And you do have the PowerPoint in your packet. I believe there's also one behind you. So if people are looking over your shoulder, you'll know what's going on. President Simmons, members of the board, I'll be brief with this presentation. But I first wanted to go through many of the aspects of what we've done with this project. As you know, the approval of the changes, we will then forward on to the Secretary of State's office, all of this based on the 2020 census. So let me just go over, you all are appointed by the board, a 7-member board, by the governor to represent one of 7 districts that make up our service area, and you must live within the district you represent. These districts have been structured to be approximately equal in population. Per state statute, the district boundaries must be reevaluated after each new federal census using updated population data. The Secretary of State has also given Oregon Transit Districts further direction on this requirement, and we've been working with her office and a consultant to meet those same statutory goals. As a reminder, when we look to balance out the existing districts, the aim is that they be contiguous, be of equal population, use existing geographic or political boundaries, not divide communities of common interest, and be connected by transportation links. Further, a new requirement of the Secretary of State's rule is that any changes be consistent with the diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility values of the Secretary of State as outlined in the agency's mission, vision, and values. I would note that we are well aligned with the Secretary of State's values for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. We consistently conduct thorough public outreach and engagement, and we've recently expanded our outreach through partnerships with community-based organizations to encourage feedback from people in communities of color, those who are transit dependent, and others who have felt underrepresented. The new data from the 2020 census shows the total population now for the TriMet Service District at 1,655,186. Population increased from the 2010 census by 182,855. Each of the 7 districts should be nearly equal in population, so that would mean we would need to equalize each district to about 236,000 people per district. So that was our goal. If you remember, these are really tiny on your PowerPoint. You don't need to squint. But we proposed 3 scenarios for you. We took those 3 scenarios out to the public. We did a lot of outreach. And I'll just touch on it. You do have an outreach report in your packet, and we will also be forwarding one to the Secretary of State. But as you can imagine, we launched the day that we came before you with our website to get the word out, of course, using the media and sending it out through all of our communications tools, one of them being a huge email blast. Newsletters, meetings, we went before TIAC and the Committee on Accessible Transportation. As you know, TIAC has a number of community-based organizations that helped us get the word out. We also had 2 virtual open houses, one in English, one in Spanish. Attendance was low. Not very many people like to, this isn't one of those things that bring people out to comment, but we did nonetheless do open houses. We did, oops, I went too fast. There we go, sorry. We had a total of 10 written comments. There were no verbal or written comments from our open house. I would note that there was a comment that I believe that was sent to the board, and we'll go over that here in a bit. Here is the current map that you are all familiar with your current districts. And then I would also just note, once again, the population change. As you see, each district has had population gain, but some districts, District 2 covering North and Northwest Portland and portions of Southwest Portland, District 1 in Washington County, and District 7 in Clackamas County, having had the greatest gains respectively. Before you is our proposal. This is Exhibit A, and if you remember, this looks very similar to the Scenario 3 that we put before you earlier. Although the scenario shown in Exhibit A makes the most border changes and affects all but one board member district, it results in the most equal allocation of population to each district. Districts are drawn for equal population, and for District 2 to have an equal population with each of the other districts, it was necessary to include some of the areas on the west side of the hills. So if you'll look at District 2, that was one of the questions that came in, was how come you're including a piece of Portland in the Washington County district? The portion, if you'll see, there's a little jagged edge on the northern part of Washington County. That little piece has been part of the district since 2012, so that's not one of the changes. The preferred revised district maps meet the Secretary of State's redistricting rule requirements, as I made mention before, being contiguous, of equal population, utilizing existing geographic or political boundaries, not dividing communities of common interest, and being connected by transportation links. TriMet also carefully evaluated the various impacts on racial and ethnic diversity associated with each of the several options considered for the revised board member districts. It was found that in all proposed redistricting scenarios, each race's percentage of district population changed by less than 1% compared to the board members' established district in 2012. That 2012 redistricting was based on 2010 census data. One final note, and I know this was a question last time we met. Remember that transit service is not allocated by service district, by your districts. It's not allocated that way. So what is before you is what we are proposing and what you'll be voting on. I would also just note, this thing is really touchy, sorry. Next steps are your approval today, your consideration and approval. We will then forward it on to the Secretary of State's office to meet their May 16th deadline. One last note that I really want to say this. I really want to thank a lot of people who really, all hands on deck to get this done in a short amount of work. Bibiana McHugh really took up the lead in developing the various scenarios. I really want to thank her. Greg Skillman, who's in the audience, Roberta Altstad, John Gardner's group for outreach. Everyone came together, and I just want to acknowledge all of their hard work in very little time in getting this before you, getting this before the community, and turning out a great result for us. So with that, I will answer any questions that you might have.
Director, no questions,
Yeah,
Director
just a
Kim.
comment. Hey, appreciate you, JC, and the rest of the team for working on this seemingly mundane item from the public's perspective. It could be, but with a paramount importance of how it actually affects representation for our citizens and residents. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Director Gonzalez?
Thank you. Thanks for all that effort. I know that this is something you have to do. So how do we leverage this effort as board members is a question I push out, not just to answer today, but I know that you had to do a lot of data analysis just to make these decisions. So whatever that data brings that can help inform us as board members, this is something that we try to do. I don't typically think by district, but it certainly helps to leverage whatever insights you've gained.
Yeah.
I would also just say, I think it continues to leverage and work that muscle of outreach for us, and we always continue to learn new things about our outreach efforts. And John Gardner's team does just an amazing job in getting the word out, and I think that we continue to learn even more every time we do these types of activities.
I know the board received some feedback from community members who perceived that them being in in Portland as opposed to in Washington County was somehow had an impact on whether or not they had the same kind of service that the Portland area had. And like Director Gonzalez, even though I was selected by the governor to represent District 3, I've always approached my work on the board as considering what the needs are for the greater good of all 3 counties. And so I say that for all of those individuals who felt that the allocation of where their home sits and what district they're in as an explanation, so that they don't think it means that they're not, not considered by the board. So, not seeing any raised flags, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve.
So move.
Thank you, Director Edwards. Is there a second?
Second.
Director Bauman, thank you for the second. It's been moved and seconded. So I'm going to call for the question. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Moving on to our final resolution is Resolution 22-04-27, and it amends TriMet's defined contribution retirement plan for management and staff employees to increase the non-elective employer contribution. Mr. General Manager, your comments.
Thanks, President Simmons. Members of the board, this is our final resolution this morning, and request the board authorization for TriMet to increase the employer contribution to our defined contribution retirement plan. This is the plan that every TriMet employee automatically receives. They can elect to contribute a portion of the pre-tax earnings, and TriMet contributes a percentage as well every month. Since 2003, when the plan was established, that amount has been set at 8%. However, in our ongoing agency efforts to attract and retain the best employees, we are increasing the amount to 10%. Employees are vested and have access to the funds and their retirement accounts after 3 years of employment at TriMet. With board approval, employees will see the increase take effect with their first paycheck in May, and I recommend your approval.
Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. A second?
Second.
Is that you, Director Lewis?
Yes.
Director Lewis seconded. Okay. Does anyone wish to make any comments? I just think this is really important and appreciate you bringing this to us. So I'm going to call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now, today we have to consider 2 ordinances. And so the first ordinance is number 366, and it's our second reading, and I'm going to ask the General Counsel, Shelley Devine, to read the ordinance by title only.
Thank you, Ms. Board President. Ordinance number 366 of the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon, adopting service changes and revising route designations. And as you noted, this is the second reading.
Thank you. Mr. General Manager, following our first reading and public hearing, is there anything you'd like to add to the record?
Thanks, President Simmons. Nothing further.
Okay. So you've seen the outreach that's been done to the potentially affected communities of the proposed changes. Community members have had the chance to make comments through a number of different channels, including last month's public hearing. And this board was briefed on the equity analysis, and you indicated your approval of those findings. Is there a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Director Bauman. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director Edwards. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion by the board? Hearing none. General Counsel Devine, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Board President. I'll start with Director Lewis.
Aye.
Director Gonzalez.
Aye.
Director Bauman.
Aye.
Director Edwards.
Aye.
Director Kim.
Aye.
And Director Simmons.
Aye.
The motion unanimously passes.
Thank you. Moving on to our second ordinance, and it's a first reading for Ordinance 367. It's regarding service changes related to TriMet's January 2022 service reduction. And I'll ask General Counsel Shelley Devine to read the ordinance by title only.
Thank you, Ms. Board President. Ordinance number 367 of the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon, adopting January 2022 service reductions and revising route designations. And as you noted, this is a first reading and public hearing.
Thank you. Before we hold a public hearing, Mr. General Manager, do you have any additional comments? And would you like to call on anyone to address questions from the board? And we've got two people here, so I'm guessing the answer is yes.
Thanks, President Simmons. Yes, as you mentioned, this ordinance deals directly with the adjustment TriMet made in January when we reduced service by about 9%. Although the service reduction occurred during COVID-19 pandemic, it was the result of our operator shortage issue which you know is ongoing right now currently. It has been our hope to fully reverse the shortage, but that just hasn't happened yet, and we're working on it at full steam. Therefore, this ordinance would allow for an extension of the January's reduction, which was adopted as an emergency action. I have here Director of Mobility Planning and Policy, Tom Mills, and Director of Transit Equity, Inclusion, and Community Affairs, John Gardner, to answer any questions. John's going to speak on behalf of Carl Green, who performed a Title VI analysis for service reduction, but he has since relocated to Denver, Colorado. Tom and John.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you, Chair Simmons and TriMet Board for having us today. As Sam had mentioned, we did cut back on reduced service in January of 2022 in response to the shortage of operators. And we did it on an emergency basis. And because of that, we were not able to bring the issue to the board. However, we do need to do that within 180 days of the reduction. And we are approaching that 180-day deadline, which is why we are here today. As General Manager DeSue mentioned, we have not been able to reverse the operator shortage to a point where we can restore service. And what I'd like to do today is talk to you a little bit about the service reduction, and then I'm going to ask John to talk about the equity, the Title VI analysis. So, okay, now I'm going to try to advance the slide. Oh, here we go. So as mentioned, this reduction is driven by the labor shortage, which is a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen over the last 2 years increased attrition of workers, as well as we face stiff competition for new workers. So we are losing workers while at the same time having trouble recruiting new workers. This was identified as the most recent need to cut service because of this was identified in late 2021, which is why we had to make kind of an emergency decision on to reduce this service. If we were to go back in time and look at the service reductions that we've done to date during COVID, we initially made a reduction in April of 2020. And at that time, what we did was we chose not to eliminate any line. Well, I take it back. We did eliminate it was a late night service to bridge the red line to the airport. But other than that, we maintain some level of service on all lines. What we chose to do is really focus on the frequency. Even if your bus doesn't come as often, your bus is coming. And so what we did is we said weekday service will run at Saturday service levels. Saturday service would run at Sunday service levels. Now, if your bus line didn't have weekend service, then your weekday service would be reduced by about 50%. But we also made a decision to maintain 2019 service levels for the lines that serve the highest scoring equity communities based using our 10-factor equity index. So there are some lines that haven't seen any reduction at all since the beginning of the pandemic. And we're proud to, still be able to provide that service to those communities. And we still see in the ridership that they're still riding, obviously not at the levels they were in 2019, but we know that that was the right decision to make. Now then, if we go to August of 2020, maybe a little naively, we thought things were looking up and that maybe we could restore some service. And so we did restore service on 18 bus lines. And at that time, we focused on our frequent service lines. And the reason for that is we saw that those lines, traditionally have always carried the highest number of riders. And we're still, despite their reductions, still doing pretty well considering the situation. So it made sense to restore those lines. And so we brought that to the board and you agreed. And the Title VI analysis, of course, also looked very positively on that. However, as we approached 2022 and we were dealing with the operator reduction of service, we realized, or operator shortage, we realized that we had to reduce service again. And so what we decided to do is, for the most part, not in every case, but the majority of the lines that we reduced in January of 2022, they are the same lines that we had restored in August of 2020. So for the most part, we just kind of went back to the April 2020 service reductions. And that's what you see here in this slide, just the number of lines that we reduced service on. Now, there was one service restoration, and we have a little bit of egg on our face here. There was a line, 32 Oakfield Road. It goes between Milwaukee, downtown Oregon City, and then it goes on to Clackamas Community College. Prior to the pandemic, on weekends, it doesn't do that whole trip. It only goes between Oregon City and Clackamas Community College. So when we changed the weekday service to operate as Saturday service, we mistakenly cut out the portion of line from Milwaukee to Oregon City. So when we made the service cuts in January of 2022, we corrected that. We didn't add trips. It's still at a lower level of service. It's still running the same number it's still running those weekday trips, except now all trips go to Milwaukee, because we felt it important. The intent was never to kind of reduce coverage. The intent was to reduce the number of trips that we're running. Now, typically, when we do service changes, as you heard in last month, we do quite a bit of outreach. We actually do 2 rounds of outreach. We do one outreach in the fall, and we then do a round of outreach in the spring. But because of the emergency nature of this, we weren't able to kind of do the type of outreach where we get feedback from the community and have kind of a back and forth. However, we did reach out to the community, and you can see in the slide, the email blasts on the website, social media. We were able to do presentations to both TIAC and the Committee for Accessible Transportation, and as well as get information to all customers, all residents along the lines that were impacted. And so with that, I'm going to hand this over to John for the Title VI review. Yeah, just that button.
Good morning. Oh. Testing. Okay. Good morning again, President Simmons, members of the board. So just a little bit of a refresher. I know that Carl presented last month in terms of the upcoming service changes, so I'll just do a few refreshing slides about our Title VI program and how we do our service analysis, and then I'll tell you the findings that you all saw hopefully in that the draft report you received in preparation for today's conversation. So just a reminder, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 provides the legal footing to ensure agencies are upholding the assurances under the Title VI, and FTA's Title VI circular requires TriMet to prepare and submit an equity analysis before the TriMet board for any major service changes or fare changes. So on the screen behind you is the Title VI analysis model. This slide provides an overview of our equity analysis decision-making process for fare and major service changes. Essentially, the analysis includes whether a service change results in a major service change. If yes, the possible impacts will be assessed to measure the impacts on Title VI populations, and if the assessment results in an adverse effect for Title VI populations, then alternatives need to be developed or mitigations need to be explored. Oops. So Tom shared the 21 lines that are affected by this major service change. Of those, 9 lines qualify underneath the Title VI threshold. One of the things that sets TriMet apart is the sensitivity of our threshold at 15%. 6 years ago, we were more like other transit properties around the country where our threshold was 25%. So over the last 2 Title VI program updates, we've lowered it to be incredibly sensitive. Now that worked better when we were increasing services, especially increasing services for non-minority or non-low income lines to make sure there was parity. But now, obviously, as a result of the pandemic, you will see more Title VI findings if we have to continue to cut, and that's what we're reviewing today. So again, evaluating impacts for service changes are different from improvements, reductions, and other major service changes, again, include the fare policy. So make note, again, Title VI policies provide the methodology and measures for the determination of adverse impacts on Title VI populations resulting from major service changes. I'm just going to do this. Analysis includes evaluating the service area populations and comparing it to the Title VI threshold lines will be flagged for potential impact if the Title VI populations are above the Title VI threshold. So another reminder is the majority of our system is either a low-income bus network or a or a minority bus network. And same is true for trains. So the vast majority of our service is for low-income and minority populations based on geographics and populations. The system level analysis, and when we do analysis, we look both at the lines affected, but also the system as a whole, because as you can imagine, you might have a 10% line change, but it never gets flagged at the system. So we add those up to make sure that the line change doesn't result in a system impact. So we do both then. So the system level analysis aims to measure impacts of all reductions combined to determine how equitable the impacts will be across Title VI and non-Title VI populations, protected populations, and a potential disparate impact would exist if a minority population benefited substantially less than the non-minority populations. This also extends to the low-income populations for disproportionate burden, so it's the same percentage calculation for both populations. All that said, looking at the system level analysis for disparate impact, if the percentage of the minority populations impacted is at least 20% greater than the percentage of the non-minority population impacted, the overall impact of the changes would be considered disparate. At this point, we found no disparate impacts for the system level analysis. The disproportionate burden policy evaluations are identical to those used to determine potential disparate impacts, but compare low-income and higher-income populations. And these changes will create a disproportionate burden impact. And the difference there is essentially a 2%, it's 2.4% higher than what we would expect, and that 2% pushes it to the disproportionate burden. So the answer to that is a yes. So evaluating impacts for service changes are different from improvements, obviously, reductions and other major service changes. So if the percentage of the minority population impacted is at least 20% greater than the percentages of the non-minority population impacted, the overall impact of the change will be considered disparate. And again, this gets into our tightness of our threshold. Even though it's only a 5.8% non-minority population receiving a benefit from adding back the service, that's greater than a 20% increase of that 5%. So it does result in a disparate impact benefit for a minority population at 2%, 2.7%. So the answer to that is yes as well. Oops. Sorry. And finally, on the system level, the disproportionate burden policy evaluations are identical to those used to determine potential disparate impacts, but compared low-income and higher-income populations. And after review, these system level impacts will result in no disproportionate burden. So just in summary, there is a line level and system level disparate impact for the one major service increase. It's about that 2% difference. There are no line level or system level disproportionate burdens for the major service increase. There's no system level disparate impact for the 8 major service decreases, but there is a system level disproportionate burden for those service decreases. A majority of the reductions are on lines and service areas with below average minority populations, and a majority of the reductions are on lines in areas with average or above low-income populations. As a result, a greater share of the region's low-income populations will stand to receive more of the burden compared to the higher-income populations. So of course, in terms of mitigation, we're reviewing a bunch of options to sort of make this hurt less and see if there's things that can be done. So much of the effort and emphasis of recovering from this is on bringing back operators to the system so we can add back the service. And obviously you've heard earlier today, we're all in on that, but we're in the process of considering final options, and that will be part of the final Title VI program analysis that you'll receive next month. So, and obviously we have to justify our choices, and the choices are justified by the lack of capacity to provide the service. And so, but this is more articulated in the Title VI report, but we're optimistic that this will hopefully be short-lived, and like many other systems, we'll be able to recover as we sort of emerge from this pandemic. In terms of next steps and timelines, obviously, this is the first time the board reading and the public hearing about these changes. Over the next 30 days, we'll have folks be able to do public comment on the full Title VI program analysis, which I think is about 23 pages. And the next board meeting will be the second board reading of this ordinance. So, and I can answer any questions. It's hard to paraphrase Carl's Title VI analysis, so.
No, you did really well. Thank you. So,
I guess I do have a question. So the standard, so you're seeing there are these disparate burdens on low-income population, and I guess I'm trying to understand the framework. So the way that you justify that is by saying there is a substantial legitimate justification. Is that the test?
You're talking about the disparate impact for the system level?
Yes.
The legitimate, the justification of the choice to reduce service?
Right.
Right, so which I believe is...
the choice to reduce service notwithstanding.
Right. So I think the result of our inability to provide service is creating a reduction in service that is having a disproportionate burden on those Title VI population, or the disparate impact on those Title VI population. Okay. And so that's the 20% reduction. Again, 8 of those lines are low-income or minority lines, so any reduction to those lines will result in either disparate impact or disproportionate burden, and that's what you've seen in this analysis. So go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Well, I would just add, these lines that are impacted, they were initially part of the April 2020 package of reductions, and at that time, it was not a disproportionate burden on low-income populations because they were packaged together with a number of lines that served higher income communities and communities with a low number of minorities. Then in August, we said to ourselves, well, let's increase some service and let's focus on those areas, the frequent service lines, many of which serve low-income communities and communities of color. And then, of course, when the emergency service reductions in January came, we said, well, okay, let's go back to what we had before. But when we went back, we didn't have a package of lines serving higher income and lower minority communities. And so as a result, it's out of balance, this specific cut. However, it is just taking us, for the most part, taking us back to where we were in April 2020. Does that help?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just interesting to me that there's not.
Director Gonzalez.
Maybe Asa can help.
Thanks.
I was trying to rephrase my question.
Continue.
I understand why there's this disproportionate burden on low-income populations, and we are allowed to proceed with that if we provide a substantial legitimate justification for it. Is that correct, or
That's
is that
correct.
just completely?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is an operator shortage.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Follow-up procedural stuff. So if we move forward right now with the reduction, are we obligated to immediately institute a mitigation measure?
So let me, you can correct me, but we have moved forward with this reduction through the FTA's allowance through the pandemic and emergencies. So now we're catching up with that decision by doing the full-blown Title VI analysis to understand the ramifications of that decision and that reality of the inability to provide the service hours. And so that not only is the substantial legitimate legal justification, but now it gives us a plan and an opportunity to plan back for adding service.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. So are we at this time then obligated to institute and retroactively apply mitigation measures?
So I'll go ahead and answer that. Yes, and we are, well, our Title VI policy says to avoid, minimize, or mitigate. Actually asked Carl, what's the difference between minimize and mitigate? And he had to go back and look, and I don't recall the response. But in any case, we do intend to mitigate. Unfortunately, because of the operator shortage, we're not able to mitigate immediately. We are looking at some efficiencies that we expect to gain this fall when Powell Garage reopens, and hoping that we can maybe apply those to some of these lines to mitigate or at least minimize the impact that they're having. However, Powell Garage reopens mid-fall, which means our next service change will be January. So that would be the earliest we would be able to make those changes.
Thank you for the clarification. That was one of my concerns, is we're under a window here, and there's a moment at which explanations might not get us through. I have a follow-up question. So knowing what we learned in August and knowing that we have mitigation measures to implement, what are you utilizing right now to decide when to pull the trigger on things like restoring service? How do you know when we've arrived back to that day?
Well, we need to start, we kind of need to stop the losses. So either it'll be a combination of lowering attrition and increasing the number of operators who come in. Right now we are seeing a net loss in operators. We now need to start seeing a net gain in operators, and that would allow us to start restoring service and hopefully one day, get back to a point where we can expand service.
Thank you.
This is one of the reasons why we've pulled the fire alarm, as I call it, to put all of the stops out there on the operator shortage, with compressing the wage and also the incentive of the bonus.
Thank you.
This is just a first reading, so we're not going to actually take any action on this today. But I do need to hold a public hearing on Ordinance 367. And so I'm going to ask, is there anyone who did not speak to the ordinance during the early public comment period who'd like to testify about the ordinance? And if so, if they would please come forward.
President Simmons, we did not have any signups this morning.
Okay. Seeing no one who wants to testify, I'm going to close the public hearing then. And as I've already indicated, there's no vote today. The second reading will be after board discussion, and a vote will take place next month. So if there's no other business before I adjourn, I'd like to actually remind the board about the need to respond promptly to the board secretary's emails when she's attempting to identify your availability to meet. There are a number of topics that the general manager and I'd like to discuss with you and to get your input. And as you can well imagine, finding times convenient for everyone is not an easy task. So that's just a reminder. I also will mention to board members, I don't know if you're all aware that if you have a cell phone, that you can actually have an exchange. The staff can help put an exchange on your cell phone so you don't have to log in to read your TriMet email. It will be actually on your cell phone in a separate line item than from your regular emails that you get. And that, if you're not using that service, I would suggest that you work with Kim Ango to arrange technical support to get that service, because it makes it so much easier to keep current if you don't have to go to your personal computer and actually log in to see your TriMet emails. So with that, I will mention that our next regular scheduled meeting is going to be May 25th, and as of today, we still plan it to be in person, but stay tuned. But today we also have one item on the agenda for a board briefing, and we have Director of Business Planning and Asset Management, Alan Lato, will present the final draft of the latest revision to the business plan, and we've had numerous opportunities to hear from Alan. But before we do that, do people want to take a 5 or 10 minute break?
Yes.
5 minutes then.
Thank you.
We'll take a 5-minute break, and we'll be back at 10 minutes after 12. And if you're not here, I'm going to start anyway.
I'll be back. Thanks.
As long as you're within 5 minutes of schedule, you're still on time.
I know. Okay, so I'm going to welcome everyone back. And as I indicated, this morning's briefing provides a final follow-up to the presentation we've received from Director of Business Planning and Asset Management, Alan Leto. Alan joins us this morning with a look at the final proposal for the annual update of the business plan. And I want to welcome you, Alan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, President Simmons and directors. The final business plan is in your packet. Hopefully you all had a chance to flip through it. What I'm going to do is just give you some highlights of the changes that have happened since the draft to remind you of how we got here. We begin work, back in the fall talking about strategies and what we need to start focusing in on. But at the February meeting, I presented the draft. Around that time, I also presented it to the CAT and to the TIAC. Following the February board meeting, we posted it for the public, and I sent out reminders to internal staff to take a look at it and review as well. Got some comments from a variety of groups, and just want to walk through a few of the highlights. Don't want to take you through all the copy editing and all of that. In fact, the version that you have, as is almost starts to feel inevitable, there have been a couple of typos that I've caught since the document went into the board packet. Nothing substantive, but for example, we described the frequency of CAT meetings incorrectly, so we need to fix that. There were 1 or 2 spelling mistakes. So those kinds of things will be fixed as we get to the point that we're putting it up online. But I just want to hit a couple of more substantive items, walk through those very quickly, identify those, and then see if there are questions. So briefly, on the weaknesses and challenges, we had a couple of additions or adjustments on pages 4 and 5, where we emphasize the shortage of operators, which you've heard a lot about and we all know is a critical issue, and identified retirements really across the agency. You heard 2 executive directors this month, so this is happening at all levels, shortage of or difficulty in hiring people across industries is definitely hitting TriMet as well, so that's a weakness to be identified. Challenges, noting that folks ending up needing to camp near or in TriMet rights of way can get in the way of our operations and the safety of operations and potentially the safety of those people as well. And also just identifying need for being resilient, not just to earthquakes, which is where it came up 4 years ago, but also to things like pandemics. I think the largest change here is on page 7, where we identify our strategic priorities. The overall picture has not changed, where ridership, financial stewardship and capacity, employees and employee experience, community and partnerships, safety, and what we had described as diversity, equity, and inclusion, but based on input from, I think, both TIAC and CAT, as well as discussion, I believe, prior to the board, or early on in the board meeting last month, and some check-in afterwards, we have adjusted that to inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, that IDEA acronym that has come to sort of represent that full body of needs to pay attention to for equity. We don't want to lose focus on anything, but we want to be inclusive in that statement. So you see that change. A couple of other things I'll just highlight on page 9, where we identify the number of measures and how we're doing on those. Those changed just a little bit. The overall picture is still the same. We're showing 67% of our measures on target and 8% in caution. That is great in one way. It's also a little misleading just because each measure is not precisely the same. So we are doing better on ridership than we were last year, but of course we're not doing nearly as well as we were 3 years ago. So always need to keep that in mind. On page 10, we have now accomplished 21 of the previous key strategic actions and adjusted others and honed them. And for this time, we now have less than 100 across the agency, which means that we are making progress on making sure we are focusing. And to that end on the focus, as I talked about in the draft, we have continued on with identifying for each of the key strategic actions, which begin on page 27, we have identified the specific strategic priority that it addresses. And you will see throughout here, ridership is a prominent one, as are all of them are represented, but ridership showing up again and again as very much needed and very much critical for us in the long run to provide the service and the benefits that we want to the community. I'm happy to say that the bus that I rode down here this morning was standing room only. They're not all that like that. We hope to get back to more of that as time goes by. I think I will just wrap up by saying there were a few other adjustments to key strategic actions, but nothing to me that really raises to, sort of, we might have added a year because it's going to take a little bit longer than we thought and we need to be realistic about it. Or we honed the language just to make sure we were all clear on exactly what we were intending, but nothing really super substantively changed the intention from the draft. With that, I'm going to stop talking. That's the highlights of the transition from the draft to the final. We did get comments. We had good discussions at both TIAC and CAT. And I also got comments from several of you, which I very much appreciate, as well as a number of comments from our own TriMet employees, which is always great so that we are interacting with that. And finally, I will say that as part of the budget, all of the teams are tying their budget page goals and objectives to the business plan goals and objectives, so we've got that synergy going. With that, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Nice work.
Yeah, I mean, it's a yeoman's task what you do. I mean, it's like trying to put your arms around an octopus. That's my analogy anyway. So if there's no further comments, I'll conclude the briefing, and I'm going to hope everyone has a good rest of the day and also send good wishes to Director Way, who's recovering at home right now. We look forward to seeing her next month, maybe sooner. You never know. So thank you. The meeting, we're done.
It's adjourned.